We meet today to consider 4 pending nominations. The 4 nominees are Ms. Tracy Stone Manning to be Director of the Bureau of Land Management, Ms. Shalonda Baker to be the Director of the Office of Minority Economic Impact at the Department of Energy, Mr. Samuel Walsh to be the General Counsel of the Department of Energy, and Dr. Alexander Light to be the Assistant Secretary of Energy for International Affairs. Welcome to all 4 nominees and your family that's with you. Thank you for being here this morning and your willingness to serve in these important positions. And again, your family is so well represented here with you and supportive, and that's always a good thing. In addition, we are fortunate to have Senator Jon Tester from the great state of Montana to join us this morning to introduce one of the nominees, Ms. Stone Manning. So welcome, Senator Tester. It's always good to have you, and you're always welcome. Before hearing from Senator Tester on nominees, I will make a few remarks about each of the nominees and then turn to Senator Barrasso for his opening remarks. Then we'll go to Senator Tester. The job for which our first nominee, Ms. Stone Manning, has been nominated is older than the Interior Department itself. Although the Bureau of Land Management, as we now know it, was created by President Truman in 1946, the Bureau traces its roots to the General Land Office, which Congress created over 200 years ago to manage our public lands. It is also a big job. The Bureau manages 245 million surface acres and another 700 million acres of subsurface. It manages hard rock minerals, coal, oil, and natural gas, development on federal onshore lands. It grants rights-of-way for electric transmission lines and oil and gas pipelines across federal lands, permits grazing on public lands, and manages timber on federal forest lands in the Northwest. It is responsible for 28 national monuments, 23 national conservation areas, and 260 wilderness areas. Nearly 50 years ago, Congress established a policy that our public lands must be managed in a manner that will both meet the nation's needs for their natural resources and preserve their special environmental values. That is not an easy task. It requires a director of balancing competing and often conflicting demands. Ms. Stone Manning has served in Senator Tester's office as head of Montana's Department of Environmental Quality, as Governor Bullock's Chief of Staff at the National Wildlife Federation. Ms. Baker, our next nominee is Shalonda Baker, who has been nominated to be the Director of the Office of Minority Economic Impact. The office was established by Congress and named Office Minority Economic Impact in 1978. The office's purpose is twofold. It advises the Secretary of Energy on the impact of energy policies on minority communities, and it ensures that minorities and minority businesses are afforded the opportunity to participate fully in energy programs. Ms. Baker has devoted her professional life to studying and addressing the health, environmental, economic, and climate impacts on disadvantaged communities. Our next nominee is Sam Walsh. Sam Walsh has been nominated to be the Department of Energy's Energy Counsel. The General Counsel provides legal advice and counsel to the Secretary and indeed the entire department. It is the General Counsel's job to give sound answers to the countless questions of law that the department faces across the breadth of its missions. Mr. Walsh is no stranger to the General Counsel's office. He served as a senior legal advisor to the General Counsel for 2 years, as Associate General Counsel for 2 years, and as Deputy General Counsel for Energy Policy for 2 years. He has spent the past 4.5 years practicing energy law. And finally, our fourth nominee is Andrew Light, who has been nominated to be the Assistant Secretary of Energy for International Affairs. Energy markets have long been world markets. Congress recognizes this when it created the Department of Energy nearly 45 years ago and gave the department technical and policy-making roles in helping shape the nation's foreign policy on energy matters. Here again, these functions hold special importance today as we confront the global reality of climate change. We cannot, nor should we try, to solve the climate crisis on our own. It is not a national problem or a regional one, but a global crisis, and we must work with other nations to solve it. Dr. Light brings to the job valuable diplomatic experience as a senior advisor and counselor to our special envoy on climate change during the Obama administration and as consultant on climate change at the World Resources Institute. At this point, I'm going to recognize Senator Barrasso for his opening statement before hearing from the nominees and then Senator Tester.
Thanks so much, Mr. Chairman. I'd also like to welcome our nominees, Tracy Stone Manning, Shalonda Baker, Samuel Walsh, and Andrew Light to the committee. Congratulations to each of you on your nominations. Ms. Stone Manning has been nominated to serve as the Director of the Bureau of Land Management at the Department of Interior. If confirmed, Ms. Stone Manning will oversee over 247 million acres of federal lands. That is 1 in every 10 acres in the United States. It's about 12% over all of our nation's land mass. She will also manage approximately 30% of America's minerals, By law, she will be required to govern these resources in a way that ensures their multiple use. The Director of the Bureau of Land Management has a tremendous amount of power. In this role, Ms. Stone Manning will have the authority over lands and minerals in every state, including my home state of Wyoming. Wyoming is proud to be America's leading producer of coal, uranium, trona, and bentonite. Almost 50% of Wyoming's surface area and almost 70% of our minerals are owned by the federal government. We rank number 1 in the federal natural gas production and number 2 in the federal oil production. In addition, grazing, recreation, and off-highway vehicle access on BLM lands are all critically important to Wyoming. The Bureau of Land Management needs a director who believes in and is committed to upholding the agency's multiple-use mandate. Based on her record, I'm concerned that Ms. Stone Manning does not fill the bill. Her career has been defined by her support for policies that restrict multiple-use activities on public lands. On Twitter and in other public forums, she has expressed views that threaten the livelihoods of energy producers, of ranchers, of farmers, of loggers, and others with a stake in the responsible use of our natural resources. She opposes an American energy dominance agenda. She supports prohibiting oil and gas development on federal lands and waters. She believes it was wrong to relocate the Bureau of Land Management's headquarters from Washington, D.C. to Grand Junction, Colorado, so it would be closer to the resources that the agency manages and the people it serves. Perhaps most troubling is Ms. Stone Manning's unvarnished political partisanship. In a tweet from February, she summarily dismissed concerns expressed by me and my Republican colleagues about then Congresswoman Holland's nomination to be Secretary of Interior as nothing more than, quote, a dog whistle reserved for a candidate of Holland's tribal status and gender. Last year, for political gain, she smeared a champion of common sense conservation and a member of this committee. As a member of the Board of Directors and Treasurer of the Montana Conservation Voters, Ms. Stone Manning signed off on political ads attacking Montana Senator Steve Daines. Well, Montanans saw right through it, and so have I. I look forward to hearing Ms. Stone Manning's explanation for why Republicans like me and Senator Daines and other colleagues on this side of the dais should have confidence that she will work with us in good faith and in a bipartisan fashion. I also look forward to hearing the testimony of our other nominees, Ms. Baker, Mr. Walsh, and Dr. Light. I hope they will explain how they plan to promote an all-of-the-above energy strategy that successfully leverages all of America's abundant energy resources. Congratulations again to all the nominees, and I look forward to hearing the testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Barrasso. And now we'll recognize Senator Tester to introduce Ms. Stone Manning.
Thank you, Chairman Manchin, and I want to thank Ranking Member Barrasso also for holding this meeting. As a Montanan, there are a few things that can rival our love for the importance of our public lands. We raise our children on these lands. We make a living off these lands. If Senator Daines was here, she is not, I would say he proposed to his wife on these lands. So it is my pleasure today to introduce my fellow Montanan, somebody who exhibits uncommon common sense, somebody who has 2 ears and 1 mouth and acts accordingly, someone who is a critical thinker, thinks reasonably and promotes reasonable decisions. That person is also President Biden's nominee to run the Bureau of Land Management. Look, folks, the last time I sat in this committee room was to introduce Ryan Zinke, a Republican representative who President Trump nominated to lead the Department of Interior, and I supported him in that position. While we may not always see eye to eye, but with all due respect to everyone here, Montanans know there's no better person for a job like the BLM position than a fellow Montanan, and you may ask why. Because Tracy is a proven leader with a track record of working across the aisle to get things done. She is honest, she is driven by facts, not political ideology. She is adept at managing the needs of diverse interests, and I know she's a perfect choice to run the BLM. Tracy and I first crossed paths when she was in charge of restoring the Clark Fork River, a critical watershed that after years of toxic runoff and neglect was in bad shape. So Tracy didn't sit on her hands. She brought together a diverse coalition made up of conservationists, listen to me, conservationists, organized labor, industry, agencies, and elected officials from every level of government, and got them rowing in the same direction to clean up and protect the Clark Fork River and the basin it runs in. I was deeply impressed with her work on that project, so I did, like any of us would do, I hired her. And I hired her to be my Missoula Regional Director and lead up the natural resource portfolio. Tracy played a key role on my staff in jump-starting conversations between people who had spent years battling one another in courtrooms and the press. These folks range from individuals in the timber community to wilderness advocates to small business owners. Ultimately, we saw some important timber projects move forward and breathtaking landscapes protected. After leaving my staff, Tracy went on to lead the Montana Department of Environmental Quality, where she was confirmed with strong bipartisan support because of her experience and her skill. At the DEQ, Tracy was responsible for overseeing the responsible development of our state's natural resources and for enforcing the laws that protect Montana's clean air and water. It is no surprise to me that she received letters of support from a wide range of groups, including sportsmen to oil and gas companies that appreciate her work and appreciate her attitude. Tracy has shown a lengthy commitment to making things work. She is well-versed in everything from oil and gas permitting to outdoor recreation, land conservation, and she understands the central role public lands play in our country. Putting her in charge of the BLM will be putting a competent, down-to-earth leader in place who knows what the best solutions come from collaborations, not steamrolling. And in an area of division, she is a person this body can get behind and work with. I urge your support to her nomination. I just want to close with this. With all due respects to the ranking member. The points that you brought up that talks about appropriate use did not describe the person that I just talked about. This person listens, she works, she does the right thing. There was a bill that came up last year about putting a gold mine on the border of Yellowstone National Park. I opposed it. I think anybody with common sense would oppose it. The headwaters and the border of Yellowstone National Park. If that's what we're talking about, then that's the kind of person we need in the BLM. There are places we can mine, there are places we can drill, there are places appropriate for resource extraction. There are other places that are not. I think Tracy Stone Manning brings that understanding to the table. And she is somebody that believes in multiple use and appropriate use. And I will tell you this, I would not be here today introducing her if I thought she was the person that you described, Senator Brasso. This is a good person that has a good heart that understands the value of our public lands. Thank you both, Mr. Chairman, Senator Brasso.
Thank you, Senator Tester, and we very much appreciate you coming this morning and taking time to introduce your friend and person very accomplished. The rules of the committee, which apply to all nominees, require that they be sworn in connection with their testimony. So if you would please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give to the Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? You may be seated. Before you all start your statements, I'm going to ask 3 questions addressed to each nominee before this committee. First, will you be able to appear before the committee, this committee, and other congressional committees to represent departmental positions and respond to issues of concern to the Congress? Are you aware of any personal holdings, investments, or interests that could constitute a conflict of interest or create the appearance of such a conflict should you be confirmed and assume the office to which you have been nominated by the President? Are you involved or do you have any assets held in a blind trust? Let's begin with you, Ms. Stone Manning. You are recognized to make your statement.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Manchin and Ranking Member Barrasso and members of the committee. I am honored to come before you today as President Biden's nominee to be the Director of the Bureau of Land Management. I thank the President for the nomination. I thank this committee for its consideration of it. I'm grateful to my state's senior senator and former boss, John Tester, for that kind introduction. I'm joined today by my husband of 30 years, Richard Manning, and I am certain I would not be here without him. With me also in spirit are my parents. My father, a submarine commander, who was buried across the river in Arlington National Cemetery, and my mother, who raised 5 kids and died just last summer. They instilled in me the core belief that service to our nation and its people are our highest calling. That has guided my every step and has me in this seat before you today. Public service, serving in government, is serving the people, and if done well, it's serving the future. My first professional job was running a land trust in Missoula, Montana. I sat around kitchen tables discussing very private family and financial matters. That's where I learned that the land and people are inextricably tied. I later directed an organization working to clean up one of the country's largest Superfund sites. We gathered people from all camps, Republicans and Democrats, Rotarians, trade unionists, environmentalists, to work for the removal of an ailing dam and the toxic sediments behind it. Our success created thousands of jobs. We started to understand the power and promise of a restoration economy. We saw how restoring the landscape restores communities. Senator Tester asked me to join his new Senate staff shortly thereafter to bring people together around tough issues. On day one, his chief of staff said to us, "The election is over. The senator wants to be clear. We work for all Montanans, not just the ones who voted for us." And so we did, solving problems regardless of party, finding solutions right for the land and the people who inhabit it. That's how we forged partnerships with loggers. That's how we broke the decades-old wilderness stalemate, by listening, by working together. I took that spirit with me when Governor Bullock asked me to serve as the director of the Department of Environmental Quality, safeguarding our clean air and clean water. The job required listening, gathering facts, and being decisive, not jumping to conclusions. It required trusting career staffers with decades of experience and getting them the tools they needed to do their jobs. Then the governor asked me to be his chief of staff. Montana had about 11,000 employees, roughly the same as the Bureau of Land Management. It was a fast-paced, all-in job that required listening, calm, and the ability to get facts and act on them. I loved it. Governor Bullock, like my boss before him, was unequivocal about the need to work with all parties to get things done. That bipartisan approach, for example, is how we passed health care for 90,000 Montanans through the legislature, and how we passed a water compact for the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes that this body passed just last November with the leadership from Senator Daines and Senator Tester. All along, my professional life has been informed by a private passion for hiking, backpacking, hunting, and floating. The power I'm granted by the mountains and rivers I love is ineffable but real. This rare privilege has left me fiercely committed to ensuring that everyone and future generations share the same opportunity. That's why I've spent the last 4 years at the National Wildlife Federation advocating for the balanced use of our public lands and congressional investment in them. I think every step of my career has prepared me for this role. The Bureau of Land Management is tasked with the daunting mission to sustain the health, diversity, and productivity of our public lands. The Bureau manages these lands for multiple uses and multiple values. Their uses range from energy development to recreation, from scientific and cultural resources to grazing and timber, and from critical minerals to wildlife habitat. There's a lot of work to do. President Biden has called on the country to build the equitable, clean energy economy of tomorrow. He has called on us to conserve and restore lands to address the crises of biodiversity and climate change. He has been clear about the need to engage everyone, not just the privileged or special interests, to ensure nature is accessible to all of us. The BLM manages roughly 1 in 10 acres in the country. It can and must help us rise to this historic moment. If confirmed, I will listen, and I will seek to work with anyone willing to help tackle these problems, regardless of party. That's how we find durable solutions, by working together. I thank you for the time and look forward to the discussion today.
Thank you so much. Next, we're going to hear from Ms. Baker. Could you pull your speaker just a little bit closer, ma'am? I'm sorry. It might help. I wasn't sure your speaker was on or not.
Actually, oh, there it is.
There it is. Now we got you.
Okay. Do I get a restart of the time? Okay. Good morning. Let me begin. I'm the daughter of 2 Black Americans. My father, Charles Lee Baker, was an extraordinary man. He grew up in Port Arthur, Texas, a low-income, majority Black and Latinx community that forms part of the heart of our nation's petrochemical, oil, and gas industries. He and his brothers grew up in the Carver Terrace housing projects, separated from one of the largest oil refineries in the world, the Texaco, now Motivo oil refinery, by a metal fence. My father grew up in this community, which, like so many environmental justice communities around this great country, routinely face exposure to many environmental hazards, including exposure to air particulate matter, a contributor to asthma and heart disease, and benzene, a known carcinogen. Like his mother and his eldest brother, my father died way too young of heart disease. Like his father and brothers and so many Americans, he made a good living in the energy industry. I stand before you in honor of his legacy and in recognition of the complex ways in which the energy system shapes American lives. If confirmed, I would be honored to help lead the administration's transformative Justice 40 initiative to ensure that communities like my father's, as well as those whom we've relied on for coal, oil, and gas production, have a future in the new clean energy economy. My mother, Constance Renee Grant, was and is extraordinary. She raised me in a home that academics would call an energy insecure home. Like 1 in 3 American households, 52.2% of Black American households, and 61.5% of Native American households. We use the oven to warm our apartment in Austin, Texas, where I grew up. On nights when we could see our breath, we layered on blankets and clothing to keep safe from the cold and to try to get a good night's sleep. In the summers, my sister and I spent days on end in the public library to keep cool. Our struggle with energy insecurity was exacerbated by our energy burden, the amount of my mother's overall household income we used to pay for energy. My mother served this country as a civil servant, both for the state of Texas and the federal government. Her government salary disqualified her from meaningful public access to public assistance, but it was too little to secure our home. Our household, like so many American households, was invisible to policymakers. We fell through the cracks. It was my mother's service to our country that inspired me to serve. In 1994, I joined about 1,200 other first-year cadets for boot camp at the United States Air Force Academy. Around 200 of us were women. 10 of those women were Black. I graduated as a commissioned officer in 1998. At the Academy, our core values were integrity first, service before self, and excellence in all we do. In 2000, with these 3 core values ingrained in my spirit, my military career ahead of me, I made the difficult decision to come out as a lesbian. I had joined the military and served during the height of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. This policy put LGBTQ service members at risk. And in my own life, it meant that an abusive partner wielded a power over me that jeopardized my oath. I left the military, deeply committed to continued service on behalf of communities that lacked a voice and lacked power. I became a corporate and project finance lawyer in Boston and later in Japan, and eventually an academic committed to exploring and exposing the injustices in our energy system. I have spent the past decade studying this energy transition, and my research has shown me that energy justice requires that we rethink and redesign the entirety of our energy system. Energy justice also requires that we recognize the tremendous sacrifices that communities like my father's have paid to ensure that the nation has access to reliable power. If I am fortunate enough to be confirmed as a director of the Office of Minority Economic Impact, I will work to advance 3 objectives. First, I will tackle the energy burden that plagues households and communities in this country. Second, I will bring clean technology parity to underserved communities that have currently been left behind in the energy transition. Third, I will pair public sector and private sector expertise to expand access to capital, create new businesses and jobs, and build wealth in communities that have persistently been underserved by federal programs. I will use my lived experiences, coupled with the academic rigor and entrepreneurial streak I have honed over the past decade, to hit the ground running during one of the most challenging periods in our nation's history. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Chairman Manchin, Ranking Member Barrasso, distinguished members of the committee, thank you very much for the opportunity to appear before you today. It is a great honor to be here. Let me begin by expressing my sincere appreciation to President Biden for asking me to serve as General Counsel of the United States Department of Energy. If confirmed, I would work hard to justify the confidence he has placed in me to serve in that role. I also want to thank Secretary Granholm for her confidence in asking me to serve as her counsel. I would be privileged to advise the Secretary and her team as they work to advance the department's vital mission. Finally, I would like to thank my wife, Elizabeth, who's joined us here today, my children, June and Miles, and my family and friends, both near and far, for their love and support. Mr. Chairman, as you know, the General Counsel is the principal legal officer of the department. The General Counsel provides legal advice to the Secretary and her team, represents the department before other federal agencies, and works with the Department of Justice to represent the department in the federal courts. Put simply, the General Counsel is responsible for ensuring that the department follows the law. Thankfully, the General Counsel does not do this alone. The department has a dedicated and knowledgeable staff of attorneys. I had the great pleasure of working alongside this group for over 6 years. If confirmed, I would look forward to working with them again, learning from them again, and once again drawing on their deep expertise in the service of the department. I have spent my career in the field of energy law. After graduating from Harvard Law School, I had the privilege to serve as a law clerk for Judge David Tatel on the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit. I then worked in the energy group of a law firm called Hogan & Hartson, which later became Hogan Lovells. In 2010, I joined the Department of Energy as an advisor to the General Counsel. I stayed at the department through 2016, and during that time was promoted first to Associate General Counsel and then to Deputy General Counsel for Energy Policy in 2014. As Deputy General Counsel for Energy Policy, I had the responsibility for legal issues arising from the department's electricity, fossil energy, and civilian nuclear programs. Since 2017, I've been a partner at Harris, Wiltshire & Granis here in Washington, D.C. At the firm, I have built a practice advising clients on energy regulatory issues and representing them before federal and state agencies and in the federal courts. Mr. Chairman, I have learned from my experience at the department how important it is to have open lines of communication with Congress. If confirmed, I will make myself available to the members of this committee, your staffs, and your colleagues throughout Congress. I hope that, if confirmed, you will find me to be responsive and collegial partner, and one that is straightforward in my interpretation of the department's legal authorities. Mr. Chairman, thank you and the committee once again for the opportunity to appear before you. I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
And thank you, Mr. Walsh. Now we'll have Dr. Light. It's just, it doesn't light up sometimes, very, very dim.
Okay, is that
Okay, you're on.
good? All right. Chairman Manchin, Ranking Member Barrasso, and distinguished members of the committee, I'm truly honored to be part of this hearing and to be nominated. I want to first thank my wife, Juliet, without whom I would not be here today, and my son, Milos, who is here with us, and Marika, my daughter, watching at home. Surely, I know. Position is that I am the grandson of coal mine, Light and Carmine Pellegrino. They both spent their lives doing grueling, dangerous work and for far too little compensation. Carmine was paid by the ton of coal he moved by hand in a day, setting a local record that some in Bridgeport, West Virginia still remember. Both my grandfathers died when I was young, but my memories of them remain clear and they fill me with pride. My grandparents put all they had into building prosperity and security for their country, their communities, and their families. I didn't grow up in West Virginia. Years before I was born, my dad moved south with my mother to Georgia. I grew up in rural towns. I developed an abiding love of the natural world that has shaped my adult life. But we went back to West Virginia twice a year to see family. And the changes I saw in both of these states, both good and bad, drive my desire to see every community flourish. With my time today, I want to focus on 3 goals deriving from my history that I will bring to the role of Assistant Secretary of Energy for International Affairs that I believe will improve seizing the opportunity to and winning that Secretary of Climate Action is simply job creation. The clean energy transition in the United States, job creating market opportunity in the United States. Think about it. The biggest growth in population, energy, new infrastructure will happen where the millions of people live. For the climate commitments of 21 developing countries, in Paris Agreement, estimated 23 trillion investment opportunity in 2030. Out of over 100, if we go after for American is simply firm to this body opportunity single day. Blind operation the U.S. can create good paying country. Second, 50 has come to them. If we don't, then other countries will take those opportunities. And while we've also stood by while competitors, especially China, have created massive international energy development programs in other countries. If fully realized, China's Belt and Road Initiative will dwarf the Marshall Plan. Belt and Road does not just build energy infrastructure around the world, it builds spheres of influence. Abandoning critical partnerships finally, when technologies of the future. Half of the energy technologies we need to achieve net zero emissions by mid-century either are not commercially viable or not available today. Nonetheless, all G7 countries are now committed to this goal, along with an increasing number of developing economies. Sectors where it is harder to reduce emissions like steel, cement, and chemicals will need carbon capture, hydrogen, and other innovations. While the Department of Energy has produced some of the most important clean energy deployment and development initiatives in the world, like the Clean Energy Ministerial and Mission Innovation, we also need to forge targeted partnerships with countries that share our principles on respect for workers, market values, environmental protection, and scientific integrity. We have to compete to become the biggest innovator and manufacturer in hydrogen, carbon capture, and other technologies that will create more jobs while meeting the climate challenge. Now, some have asked me over the years if it's odd that a grandson of 2 coal miners is as committed to a clean energy transformation as I am. But I don't have any doubt that my grandparents would approve. Like them, I only want to build prosperity and security for our country, our communities, and our families. Jack Light and Carmine Pellegrino would surely understand that, and then they tell me to get to work. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Light. We'll now start our questions, and I'll start with you, Dr. Light. I believe that we have the Department of Energy and the National Laboratories and ARPA-E, as you're pretty much aware of. The brain power needed for us to lead the world in technology innovation, to create new jobs in the country, to supply world markets, to reduce carbon. I often say that we cannot eliminate our way to a clean environment, a global clean environment. We have to innovate our way. So I know in your statement you just made, you previously served as senior advisor and India counselor to the U.S. Special Envoy on Climate Change. How can we get India, China, Russia, and indeed much of the world to do their fair share in reducing carbon emissions, not by trying to force them to eliminate what they're going to use in their backyard, but how we can get them to start using it with technologies that we do through innovation?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. I think the first thing we needed to do, and President Biden has done it, is rejoin the Paris Agreement on climate change. It doesn't force the
There's no
United States
teeth to it.
What's that?
There's no teeth to it.
There's no teeth to it with respect, doesn't force any country to
Correct.
do anything. But the commitments that have been made by China and India and other big emitters internationally, which have some now oversight and transparency that we can see whether they're doing what they're doing, would not exist without the Paris Agreement.
Gotcha.
And that is the forcing agreement that we're going to use to ratchet to put more pressure on them to do more. India is doing a lot. India has the biggest sectoral energy targets in the world. 450 gigawatts by 2030 is what Prime Minister Modi has committed to. We've created a new overarching umbrella agreement with India where I think we can actually build things like a hydrogen or CCUS-driven steel, indigenous steel production capacity, which the United States can then sell to. And that's how we're going to do this. We're going to show that we can work with these countries together. China may be harder, but I think that we'll get there eventually with them, and they'll see that as the United States is back at the table, they're going to have to step up. They no longer can claim some mantle with other, big players out of the question. And we actually are seeing this now. So to date, about 72 countries have already responsible for about 35% of global emissions, have stepped up and said that they're going to put new commitments, new bigger commitments under the Paris Agreement, and another 80 responsible for 40% of global emissions are already there. So already we're seeing an impact of the United States back at the table, pulling countries back into it to do more, and we've got to do that.
Well, being a grandson of two former coal miners from West Virginia, we know you understand the common sense. It's going to take an all-in energy policy for us to go further ahead. I would ask to Ms. Tracy Stone Manning, the importance of the BLM is just enormous, as has been spoken about. And I'm learning more and more about it every day. But with that, I would ask you, do you believe the United States of America should be energy independent?
Senator, yes, I do.
Okay. Do you agree with Secretary Holland that fossil fuels must continue to play a major role in America's energy grid for years?
Senator, yes, both she and the president have said as much.
Okay. And do you believe we could strike the right balance between environmental protection, responsible energy development, so that we can maintain our energy advantage?
Senator, I think we can and must.
With the BLM, what do you plan, your plans basically with BLM? Right now, we have an awful lot of people, and myself very much concerned, about the emissions of methane from drilling. Do you have any thoughts about that, of how we could curb that? And I will give you a little tidbit into what I found out, that most of the problem arises because we can't get permits to build pipelines to take the methane off of government land. So you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, Senator, thanks for the question. I think everybody can agree that burning money is a really bad idea. And if I have the honor of being confirmed, I'll work with you and anybody willing to work on figuring out how to capture that methane and make good use of it.
Thank you. Ms. Baker, the President set a goal of directing 40% of the benefits of federal investments in clean energy training, workforce development, environmental cleanup, clean water infrastructure for the disadvantaged communities. What is your understanding of the meaning of the term disadvantaged community as used in the Justice Initiative? And does it extend to the coal mining communities in my state of West Virginia and many other states which bore the brunt of building and powering this nation and now risk being left behind?
Thank you so much for your question, Senator. The Justice 40 initiative is absolutely at the cornerstone of this administration's climate transition policy. As you mentioned, the president has made this commitment to ensure that 40% of the overall benefits of certain investments go to disadvantaged communities. In the same executive order announcing the Justice 40 initiative, the president makes a deep commitment to energy communities, which are communities that are experiencing the transition away from fossil fuels. And in fact, he has ensured, or he has said that both energy communities and disadvantaged communities will be at the front of his economic policy with respect to climate. And if confirmed, I would be delighted to work both with energy communities as well as disadvantaged communities to ensure that we have clean energy solutions in those communities, that we bring economic development into those communities, and we also bring opportunities for wealth creation in those communities. And the president has made it clear that he is deeply committed to both energy communities and disadvantaged communities.
Thank you. Senator Barrasso.
Thanks so much, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Stone Manning, there was a 2020 Energy and Environment News article from January of 2020, so a year and a half ago. This was what they reported. Quote, when Montana Senator Steve Daines began pressing his colleagues, including all of us, to support fully funding a popular conservation program, he might have anticipated a bit of praise for his bipartisanship. Instead, the Montana conservation voters, they say, have spent months spewing criticism at the first-term senator via digital ads, yard signs, a website, and in their latest effort with sardonic vodka. Now, the article then goes on, it describes Senator Daines' efforts in 2019 to persuade all of us in the Senate to provide full mandatory funding for the Land and Water Conservation Fund. Working with other Senate colleagues, Senator Daines secured $495 million, the largest appropriation for the fund in more than 15 years. So environmental groups across the board praised the funding. Montana Trout Unlimited called Senator Daines a champion for permanent full funding. Apparently, this is not good enough for the Montana conservation voters, which the ENAE article noted is, quote, staffed with individuals who work in Democrat congressional and state offices and on campaigns. Well, Ms. Stone Manning, you were a member of the board of directors and actually the treasurer of the Montana conservation voters, and so this is the group that participated in this political hit job against Senator Daines, and you were the treasurer for the funding of those ads and the attacks. So on behalf of all the Republican senators, we want to know how members of this committee can have any confidence that you're going to work with us in any kind of fair or bipartisan way.
Senator, thank you for the question. And to this committee and to the body, thank you so much for passing full and permanent funding of the Land and Water Conservation Fund. My role at the National Wildlife Federation running our public lands program, I think was a very bipartisan approach in that really bipartisan success. And I think my track record, my professional track record across the last 30 years has a very Western sensibility to it, which you know better than most. In the West, if you want to get something done, you have to work together.
So, but in terms of your role specifically with the Montana conservation voters and your role as being on the board and the treasurer, do you still believe today all of the things that your group said about Senator Daines over the past year and a half?
Senator, I have led nonprofit organizations and I have been on the board of nonprofit organizations, and I take very seriously the difference in those two roles. I was a voluntary member, board member, who had a core belief of never micromanaging staff. And I hope that you would look to my record in my day job of that issue and my approach to it.
In 2020, you're the senior advisor of public lands for the National Wildlife Federation. Talked about that. And you urged the Forest Service to abandon plans to expand oil and gas development in our national forests. And you said at the time, deadline loopholes for oil and gas companies so they can avoid compliance with environmental regulations. Because you said that proposed rule would create. Well, I disagree. I think oil and gas production on federal lands, certainly I see it in Wyoming, is subjected to some of the most stringent regulations in the world. There's currently no end in sight for President Biden's federal ban on new oil and gas leasing on federal lands, which is likely going to lead to American importing their resources, including from foreign nations, and where in foreign nations, their efforts, they're producing these energy much lacks the environmental standards that we have here. Are you concerned that oil and gas production is going to then migrate from federal lands in our country to other areas, making us more dependent on foreign countries, including the ones with very few environmental standards?
Senator, thanks for the question. I think that the President and Secretary have been clear that this leasing pause is giving the department time to take a hard look at the oil and gas program and make sure that it's right for the century that we are living in. And if I have the honor of being confirmed, I look forward to digging in and helping with those discussions.
Ms. Baker, the application of hydraulic fracturing, horizontal drilling, advanced seismic imaging has led to much greater production in this country of natural gas. This has led to lower gas and electricity prices for consumers, especially those of low incomes, to the point that in 2019, the White House Council on Economic Advisors found that, quote, by lowering energy prices, the shale revolution is saving U.S. consumers $203 billion annually, or an average about $2,500 for a family of four. They went on to say, in other words, low energy prices are like a progressive tax cut that helps the poorest households the most. So do you agree with that assessment that the shale revolution has actually been an economic benefit to many low-income households?
Thank you so much for the question, Senator Barrasso. I agree wholeheartedly that lowering energy costs for the lowest income Americans is a good thing.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Now we have Senator Heinrich.
Chairman, I am quite pleased this morning to support the nomination of Tracy Stone Manning, and I hope that this committee will advance her nomination quickly. I frankly can't say how refreshing it is to have a BLM nominee who actually has experience in tribal issues, in land conservation, in water settlements, in wildlife conservation, in all of the things that we wrestle with in Western states each and every day. Westerners know that the only way to solve natural resource challenges is to work with people from all walks of life. And Tracy has done that throughout her career. She has worked with ranchers and wilderness advocates, with hunters and mountain bikers, and trade unionists and tribal leaders. And she knows how to work across the aisle to find creative solutions. The BLM has been without a confirmed director, for good reason in some cases, for almost 4.5 years. That should not continue one day longer. I hope we can confirm Tracy Stone Manning for BLM director very soon so that she can get to work. And with that, I have a couple of questions for you, Ms. Stone Manning. New Mexico has two relatively new national monuments, BLM monuments, the Rio Grande del Norte and the Oregon Mountains Desert Peaks, established in 2013 and 2015. However, neither monument has ever had a monument management plan to guide on-the-ground management. A planning process would allow local residents, tribal leaders, all sorts of public land users in those areas and business owners to weigh in on how those areas should best be managed to protect their resources and the activities that occur there. If confirmed, will you make sure that the BLM works with the communities around these monuments to finally complete those plans?
Senator, yes, I will. I agree wholeheartedly that the very best approach is to bring all the stakeholders together to come up with the best plan.
The BLM last week, in fact, began the process to finalize the route for the SunZia Transmission Project, which is a project that is critical to fully developing New Mexico's carbon-free energy resources. Without this line, wind and solar energy generated in New Mexico, particularly wind, has no way to be moved to larger energy markets to our west. The two lines will carry over 3 gigawatts of carbon-free electricity and create more than 6,000 construction jobs. I'm incredibly pleased to see SunZia moving to this next part in the process, and I would just ask, if confirmed, will you commit to working with me to ensure that this process stays on track and meets its schedule?
Senator, I'd be honored to do so.
Ms. Baker, according to a 2018 study by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, tribal lands actually have the capacity to provide about 10% of the nation's total energy, almost 7% of our renewable energy capacity as well. Despite existing DOE programs, we've seen very little private capital flow to tribal renewable energy projects. And to date, the Tribal Energy Loan Guarantee Program, for example, has not made a single loan, and the Tribal Energy Resource Agreements from the Energy Policy Act of 2005 have yet to be implemented. If confirmed, would you commit to working to address the challenges that are contributing to the underinvestment of private capital in renewable energy projects that directly benefit sovereign tribes?
Thank you so much for the question, Senator Heinrich. I spent several years serving as a project finance lawyer and really learned the importance of access to capital across so many different landscapes. I've also worked closely with indigenous communities as a scholar, first in Mexico and later in Hawaii. And I know that these communities face a persistent lack of investment. If confirmed, I would work hard and closely with Waheela Johns, who is currently the director of the Office of Indian Energy, as well as Jigger Shah, who's the director of the Loan Programs Office, to really look into the barriers that indigenous communities currently face in accessing DOE and federal funds, as well as private investment opportunities. And so I'd also be delighted to work with your office to look at solutions to this persistent problem.
Thank you, Ms. Baker. And I would encourage you to call on us for help to where there are needs to change authorizations, to change legal language, so that we can finally accomplish some of the goals that we've set for a number of years now. Please count us in, because there is a dramatic underinvestment in these communities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Now we have Senator Lee right here. Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Stone Manning, let's start with you, if that's all right. Some would argue that overemphasis on the minimization criteria for off-road vehicle trail designation frequently leads to what might be characterized as sort of a dismissal of the BLM's Federal Land Policy Management Act multiple use mandate. If confirmed, how would you work to seek to preserve the rights of off-road vehicle users and prevent these minimization criteria from becoming, in effect, elimination criteria?
Senator, thanks for the question. Back when I worked for Senator Tester and we pulled stakeholders from all walks of life, people who normally wouldn't be in the room together, much less at the table together, we did really good work with the motorized community, with mountain bikers, with hikers, with hunters, with timber representatives, looking at maps and understanding that the landscape was big enough for everyone, and just making very hard and smart decisions about how to share the land appropriately. I would take that approach to this work, and I would ensure that both science and law and input from stakeholders was driving the outcome.
Oh, thank you. All right, let's talk about wild horses for a minute. Since 1988, we've had appropriations bills that have been passed by Congress that have included provisions prohibiting the culling of old, sick, or lame horses. And during this same time period, over the last 32, 33 years, wild horse and burro populations have skyrocketed. FY 2020 funding for the program was about 5 times the amount of FY 2000. But in 2019, 67% of the budget was used to hold these animals off range. Do you think that this prohibition is inhibiting the BLM's ability to fulfill its management duties? And if not, how would you plan on getting our herd management areas to an appropriate management level?
Senator, I appreciate the question. This has been a long-standing, difficult problem with herd sizes doubling every 4 years. So obviously we need to work together and perhaps find some creative solutions, perhaps find some solutions with the help of Congress. It's clear to me that we need to ensure that humane treatment drives these decisions. And I think what I would bring most to the work is the understanding that we are managing for the landscape, we are managing for the health of the landscape, and have that sort of core principle drive the work.
And you'd agree that in many cases, wild horses and burros are, they're non-native species, and in some cases, overpopulation has resulted in environmental degradation. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, Senator, as I was saying, it is a long-standing problem. We have a law from Congress that is saying horses have a place on the landscape, but of course we have a bunch of other multiple needs for the landscape as well. And when populations are bigger than our management objectives, we need to work together to do something about it.
You've been very vocal in your support for permanently funding the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which is, of course, used for the acquisition of new federal lands. There was, during the previous administration, an order issued that would have required the written expression of support from governors and local governments before land in those areas was acquired under the LWCF. But earlier this year, the Biden administration revoked that order. Do you think it was necessary, or at least good practice, to gain local support before acquiring additional federal land? And would you prevent acquisition of new land under the LWCF if that acquisition was opposed by local government officials?
Again, I need to thank this committee for this incredible, beautiful American conservation program that touches every county. If we all close our eyes and think about the park we went to as a kid, it's pretty likely that it was funded by LWCF. When Congress reauthorized the program permanently, it had that debate, and my job will be to implement the law as it was passed.
Okay, so you don't have a position on whether it's a good idea to acquire land in those cases, in those areas where the local government opposes it?
I think stakeholder input is always important, Senator.
Okay. Stakeholder input, of course, is different than acquiring it against the opposition of a local government. Those are two different things. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see my time's expired.
Thank you, Senator. Now we have Senator Rono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask the following two questions of all nominees who appear before any of my committees on which I sit, so you can respond on this individually, but together. First question, since you became a legal adult, have any of you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No.
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 Have any of you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement related to this kind of conduct?
No.
No.
Thank you. So, Ms. Baker, the Department of Energy's Office of Minority Economic Impact has many responsibilities, including to promote historically underserved communities and small disadvantaged businesses, i.e. minority-owned businesses, which have been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. And many times this means making sure small disadvantaged businesses have access to federal contracting opportunities through the DOE. President Biden's been working to expand opportunities for those businesses and recently proposed providing them with an additional $100 billion in contracting opportunities over the next 5 years. What do you see as the largest obstacle to expanding opportunities for historically underserved communities and small disadvantaged businesses?
Thank you for the question, Senator Hirono. It's great to see you again, and I enjoyed
Aloha.
Aloha. I enjoyed my time in Hawaii. So for the last several months, I've served as the Secretary's advisor on equity, and I've had the pleasure of leading the execution of Executive Order 13985, which you may know is the President's order on equity. And in that order, the President requires every single federal agency to examine and explore any barriers to accessing procurement and contracting opportunities. We are right in the middle of evaluating the barriers to accessing procurement opportunities and contracting opportunities, and I look forward to reviewing our committee's analysis of those barriers. I do see access to finance, access to resources as one of the key parts of really creating wealth in communities of color. And if confirmed as the director of the Office of Minority Economic Impact, I would work closely with the committee that is leading this work, as well as entrepreneurs out in the field and other agencies who have access to resources to bring those resources into communities of color. So I'm really excited to do that work if confirmed.
It makes sense to figure out what the barriers are, but part of it, I would think the function of your office would be outreach, because I've worked with a lot of small businesses and minority-owned businesses myself. And a large part of it is, one, they don't even know that the opportunities exist. And if they do exist, just going through the process can be very daunting. So outreach, those kinds of opportunities really have to be looked at, and initiatives must be taken to reach out to these communities. And it sounds as though that you have experience in doing that.
Yes, Senator, I do have extensive experience with stakeholder engagement, and I'm lucky enough to be nominated to serve in a role in an office that has deep roots in communities of color around this country and a proven track record of working with minority businesses. Of course, we need to do more, and of course, there's a tremendous opportunity in this clean energy transition to ensure that businesses that are led by women and led by people of color have a seat in this transition.
The DOE's own U.S. Energy and Employment Report noted that ethnic and racial minorities make up a lower than average portion of the energy workforce. We're not talking about the workforce, the people who are actually doing the things in this area. What are the major factors why this is the case? Is it lack of educational opportunities? What? Why is it that there are so many significantly lower numbers of ethnic and racial minorities working in these areas?
Well, Senator, I think you've highlighted a key issue that, if confirmed, I would be delighted to look into further. The Office of Jobs is now led by a wonderful person, Jennifer Kropke, who comes out of the labor movement and has a deep commitment to actually increasing the number of jobs that people of color have access to in this clean energy transition. If confirmed, I would work closely with Jennifer to ensure that the opportunities that this transition will present, and we know that there will be millions of jobs created, are equitably distributed. And so, if confirmed, I would look forward to digging into the problems and helping to develop the solutions.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Langford, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Witnesses, thank you for your testimony today. Getting a chance to be able to go through all this. It's not a fun process to be able to walk through this, so appreciate you actually stepping up to be able to do it. Ms. Stone Manning, let me ask you a little bit, just a broad philosophical question you've gone through before. Fill in the blank. Public lands are for what?
Public lands are a beautiful American, unique idea that are for many purposes.
So give me some examples of some of those purposes.
From
your perspective and legally as well, I guess.
Our public lands develop energy. They provide places for people like me to hunt. They provide places for ranchers to graze. They provide places for people to take their families backpacking and car camping. It's a full suite of things that our public lands provide.
So I've found in public lands, almost always what you love to do on public lands, you wish that was the only thing happening on public lands, and everyone else should go away. So for the folks that love to do four-wheeling, they love to go four-wheeling on public lands, and everyone else is in the way. And for everyone else that wants peace and quiet, they want the four-wheelers to go away on it. And it's the same with energy development. So my question is, you're going to be driven a lot to be able to balance out all those different priorities. How do you set those priorities? Because there will be many times that people are going to say, this part of our public lands is really good for oil and gas, or really good for renewables development, or it needs to put a transmission line to be able to move wind power in across it. And other folks are going to say, no, I don't want that here. I want that somewhere else. But that's actually the right spot, especially for energy, mineral development, infrastructure development. How are you going to balance that?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I think that's at the heart of what makes me ready to do this job. I have spent a career of balancing the needs of various communities and stakeholders, and I would do that and then some in this position. I would have law and science and community input drive decision-making. It's 245 million acres. There's a lot of room out there for all of us. We just need to be super smart about how we engage with the landscape.
You once made the comment that there's plenty of room in the West for oil and gas development. Is that true?
There is plenty of room in the West for oil and gas development.
The next big question is always going to be how long it takes to get a permit, how long it takes to get through the process, which is perpetually a challenge because it can be, yes, we can do it, but it's going to take us 5 years to get there. And it becomes its own unique challenge to do that. You can't answer that today. I would just tell you that'll be important to this committee as well, because it's one thing to say it is available. It's another thing to say it's really not available because it's going to take a really long time to get to it. And just the capital won't flow to places that it takes a really long time to actually use the lands, and the taxpayers lose out. The country loses out in that long term. I need to switch over. Mr. Walsh, I apologize. I'm running close on time on this. You have a very difficult task long term. You're going to protect the taxpayers from a lot of unneeded litigation because you have a responsibility to be able to step up and to tell folks that say, I really want to do something, yes or no, does the law allow that or not? So my very straightforward question for you is approaching a task as a council, every single administration, regardless of who's in the office, every single administration is going to come to the council at some point and say, I really want to do this. Find me a way to do it. And the council has the responsibility to say, you can do that if Congress passes a new law. Instead of saying, yeah, here's a little unique way, novel, that no one's ever tried before that will end up in 10 years of litigation and millions of dollars in taxpayer funds. What's your thoughts on that? What's your role as council?
Well, thank you for the question, Senator. It's a good question, one that every government lawyer faces, as you're certainly aware. But the bottom line is that the role of general counsel is to provide frank, candid legal advice. And when the answer to a legal question is no, the answer is no. The secretary and other senior leaders in the department will not be served by legal advice that takes the department's programs and puts them into protracted litigation.
I would agree. Dr. Light, we're going to count on you to deal with LNG exports and multiple things. Our global power is extended based on some of our resources. What is your thoughts on the export of LNG?
Thank you, Senator. So my thoughts on it are that U.S. LNG exports are at an all-time high. In March, we exported 10.2 billion cubic meters of LNG, which was a record. It looks like 2021 will increase by 50% over 2020. And so they're very high. My job in this role is to make sure that U.S. gas is competitive around the world. More and more countries are looking for cleaner sources of gas. They're going to go around the world and do that. Russia's got the dirtiest source of gas right now. We got to make sure that ours is cleaner and that ours fill those markets around the world, and that's what I intend to do.
That'd be helpful. Thank you.
Senator Cortez Masto.
Thank you. Congratulations to all the nominees. Welcome to family and friends. Mr. Walsh, let me start with you, and following up with my friend and colleague, Mr. Langford's questions on your position as general counsel. Can you share your general position on whether Yucca Mountain in Nevada should be a federal repository for the nation's nuclear waste?
Oh, thank you for the question, Senator, and I certainly understand the importance of this question to you and your constituents in Nevada. President Biden and Secretary Granholm have both stated very clearly that they regard the Yucca Mountain site to be unworkable. Secretary Granholm has advocated for a approach based on consent-based siting along the lines of the recommendations provided by the Blue Ribbon Commission. I'm also aware that Congress has recently appropriated funds for the department to begin to pursue consolidated interim storage through a consent-based siting process. And so, if confirmed, I would look forward to providing legal support to that effort and to working with your office.
Thank you, and I appreciate your comments because the entire delegation at least on the Senate side, have supported Nuclear Waste Informed Consent Act that we introduced. And I think it is so important that we listen to the states and local governments and tribal communities within a state when the federal government is looking to take action. And that's why I invite my colleagues, including Senator Lee, to join the Nuclear Waste Informed Consent Act, because it does give local governments in our states and tribal communities a say in any action that federal government may want to take. Let me move on, Mr. Walsh. In 2018, the state of Nevada learned that the Trump administration it secretly shipped plutonium intended for weapons production to Nevada to be stored indefinitely at the Nevada National Security Site. I was able to reach an agreement with the Department of Energy, which the state used to secure a settlement with the department last year to begin removing the plutonium this year. Can you commit to upholding this agreement and taking the necessary legal actions to ensure that the DOE and National Nuclear Security Administration remove the plutonium from the NNSS?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I am aware of the plutonium transfer to the NNSS that you're referring to, and I certainly understand the importance of the issue to you and to the state. And if confirmed, yes, I would do everything in my power to ensure that the department fulfills its obligations under the agreement.
Thank you. I appreciate your answer. Ms. Stone Manning, thank you for having the conversation with me. Like my colleagues, the relationship with the federal government in the state of Nevada is so important. 85% of the land in Nevada is owned by the federal government. 60% of that is BLM. And so I appreciate your comments on the necessary opportunities for collaboration and how important it is to managing our public lands. So let me start there, because the Las Vegas Valley in Clark County is home to nearly 2 million people and growing. And the valley is essentially landlocked by the Interior Department managed lands. And the BLM is the manager's hundreds of small parcels throughout the entire metropolitan area. In order for some city management actions to occur, it often requires collaboration with federal land managers. And in order to ensure local land management needs are being met and to support our local governments facilitate a growing population economic diversification efforts, the Interior Department is a focused and a present partner, and it is so essential. And it requires you to work with us to prioritize permitting and realty applications. It requires greater alignment between the BLM and state and local governments on renewable energy and transmission siting. And it also requires the distribution of funds from the Southern Nevada Public Lands Management Act special account for regional conservation and environmental enhancement projects, among other priorities. So my question to you is, can I have your commitment that you will prioritize efficient land management and greater collaboration in Southern Nevada?
Senator, you do have my commitment. I'd be happy to work with you and locals on the ground to make sure that government is serving the people. That's our job.
And then let me talk about, and I've only got a few seconds left here, but one of the areas that is important for Nevada that we are dealing with, and we're seeing it all across the West, are these wildfires. And we have a lot of rangeland fires. And we've worked very hard over the last couple of years to really focus on wildfire prevention, suppression, and restoration. Would you commit to working with us to address greater amount of prevention, suppression, and restoration resources to the rangeland and wildland urban interface areas?
Senator, yes, as a Westerner, I, along with millions of other people, have breathed that smoke. And I am, if I have the honor of being confirmed, I am really excited to full-on attack the invasive grass problem in the Great Basin, which is a carrier of those fires, and to work with local entities to make sure that communities are as safe as they can be.
Thank you.
Senator Cassidy.
Hey, Dr. Light. Thank you all, by the way, for your willingness to serve. Appreciate it. Dr. Light, you in your testimony speak about the clean energy transition bringing lots of jobs, and you also speak positively about U.S. natural gas. Now, as we know, and you also reference the Belt and Road Initiative, part of which is China building coal-fired plants with primitive technology around the world. So there's mixed feelings, mixed signals, if you will, though. John Kerry is speaking against the U.S. financing an LNG import facility in Mozambique when, like, if they don't use our natural gas, They may use Chinese technology, which is primitive, and we will increase the emissions by over 100% because of that transition, not to mention the loss of jobs here and the gain of jobs elsewhere. So you see my confusion. It's as if Mr. Kerry doesn't know the difference between coal and natural gas in terms of its cleanness, if you will, and our technology versus primitive Chinese technology. So you'll be the agency responsible for this. How do we resolve this? There's uncertainty as regards the Biden administration's desire to fund these projects. Do you think the U.S. should continue to fund LNG projects around the world, again, to use our clean burning natural gas as opposed to the Chinese primitive technology for coal-fired plants?
Well, Senator, thank you for the question. I think that what China is doing, as I said, is a threat not only to the climate, it's a threat to U.S. national security. It has to be stopped. It has to be stopped in a coordinated way. And frankly, the United States government has not been doing that for the duration of the extent of the creation of the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. So we've got to create a whole-of-government approach. We've got to work together. We've got to be able to go into these countries and offer them packages that
do those packages include funding LNG import facilities?
The packages can certainly include natural gas, sir. So we've got to be able to go in and assess what is the best option for these countries, given what their commitments are with respect to their energy transition. We've got to offer something which is a better deal than what China can happen, and we've got to be able to provide some finance that will drive in private capital to do that. And that's how we're going to create jobs not only in those other countries, but also jobs at home.
So Mr. Kerry has suggested that investing in oil and natural gas infrastructure domestically or abroad is short-sighted. So that would certainly work against an all-of-government response, some of which has to include the capital markets, and that seems like a clear negatory upon capital markets being invested in these projects. Do you follow my kind of frustration by that sort of comment?
Sir, I think that anytime we get into a conversation of a sort of a black versus white when it comes to energy access around the world, we got to provide energy access for other countries. We've got to provide energy security. We have to provide decarbonization. Energy is good. It's the emissions that are a problem. We can become the leaders in abated natural gas technology around the world. We can become the leaders in abated coal technology around the world. We've got to innovate towards that way, and we've got to help countries to get there. And I think that's the kind of combined packages that we need to do.
So in your role, you would say, if I may,
Please.
Depending upon the type of infrastructure, but investment, U.S. investment in LNG infrastructure or some other fossil fuel infrastructure, indeed may be far-sighted. That would be something in which we should promote. Is that a mischaracterization of what you just said?
Not at all, sir. As long as we're also looking at the emissions picture, as long as we're providing the cleanest version of gas around the world, that's what I said before to Senator Langford. And I think that we also need to look at helping to make sure that the new fossil technologies that are created in other parts of the world, new fossil energy producing facilities, are also decarbonizing at the same time. And I think we can do that.
Sounds good. Ms. Stone Manning, I know I wasn't here. I think you may have replied, but I just wasn't here to hear it. You've been incredibly partisan in your past, including working actively against the candidacy of Senator Daines. Theoretically, you're going to work with Republicans in your office. I see you have a prepared reply. You're pulling that over. Can you speak from your heart? Because it seems like your heart is that you really don't particularly care for Republicans. And I'm frankly wondering kind of, just, my gosh, should I vote for somebody who seems to be like, well, I'll stop there. How would you reply?
Senator, I appreciate the question, and my parents are rolling in their graves, who are Republicans. I was raised in a bipartisan household. I live in a bipartisan landscape. I think that my career has shown that the only way to get things done in the country, and specifically in the West, is to work together. I have a demonstrated track record of doing that. Elections can be tough. I was supporting my former boss, Governor Bullock, but the election is over, and I will honor the outcome of that election.
Thank you. I yield back.
Senator Hickenlooper.
It's hard getting back into in-person panels. First, I want to thank all four of the panelists for your commitment to public service. I think this has been a very vigorous and encouraging discussion. Ms. Stone Manning, there's been a lot of discussion about the movement of the BLM's headquarters out of Washington by the last administration. Obviously, it was done in haste, and it didn't pan out the way it was promised. 328 headquarters jobs were planned to be moved to Grand Junction, Colorado, but 287 people either retired or found different employment. Only 41 people moved out to the west, and just a fraction of that, just a total fraction to Grand Junction. The victims of the last administration's action weren't just the BLM employees, but the people of Grand Junction. The Grand Junction Daily Sentinel wrote, "A day after feeling like this was a game changer for Grand Junction, the letdown is palpable." And I think I want to make sure that as you consider the future of the headquarters of BLM, you recognize that those 41 people in Grand Junction are in the balance in some way.
Senator, thank you for the question, and I appreciate our conversation about this the other day. It's my understanding that the department and the secretary are currently reviewing that they are surveying employees, and if I have the honor of being confirmed and get there in a timely way, you have my commitment to dive in and carry the folks of Grand Junction and their concerns with me to the consideration.
Great. And also, we discussed a little bit about the Uncompahgre Field Office's resource management plan that was released last April, and that it'd be good to be able to know that some of that was, again, delivered in haste without maybe as much science as we'd want. Governor Polis has spoken out against it, that we can work together on reviewing that.
Senator, if I have the honor of being confirmed, I'll work really closely with you and the folks in Colorado on the ground whose voices need to be heard in that planning process.
Great. And then implicit in all that, of course, Secretary Holland committed to coming out to visit and see firsthand. We hope that we extend the same invitation to you as well.
Senator, I love Colorado. I would love to come visit.
Great. Ms. Baker, one part of the Office of Minority Economic Impact's mission is to facilitate partnerships with minority-owned and minority-serving entities. In addition to this committee, I also serve on the Small Business Committee and have been a strong believer in small businesses and the critical role they play in bringing about a clean energy economy. Just a couple of weeks ago, I introduced a green energy loan enhancement program as one of a set of 4 bills to really enhance access to capital for small business administration resources for historically underserved communities, increasing access to capital for green investments. Can you speak just for a little bit about some of the roles that minority-owned small businesses have to play in advancing our clean energy goals while ensuring that the wealth, the jobs, the opportunities are distributed equally and fairly as a result?
Senator, thank you so much for the question, and thank you for your leadership in this area. I think we have an unprecedented, once-in-a-generation, perhaps once-in-a-century opportunity to really build back better. And the communities of color around this country have been absolutely gutted by this pandemic, both in terms of death rates and in terms of job loss. We are building our nation back, and we are doing so in service of a clean energy future. I think there's a critical role for minority-owned businesses to play in this transition. I'll also flag that minority-serving institutions, universities, are a key partner in this transition as well, and they should be a part of this broader economic development strategy. We know that there will be millions of jobs created, there will be thousands of new businesses created, and many millionaires made in this transition. And it would be my hope, and it would be my honor, if I'm confirmed, to work closely with the ecosystem of entrepreneurs out there who are just waiting for federal dollars to seed their businesses. So thank you so much for your leadership, and I would look forward to working with you on this effort.
Great. And as so often the case here, I don't have enough time for all my questions, but I will submit the questions to both Dr. Light and Mr. Walsh. I think you've both done more than adequate jobs of presenting all the potential you bring to these jobs. Ms. Baker, you as well, and Ms. Stone Manning, I look forward to seeing you in Colorado once you're confirmed and working together on a bunch of these issues. So thank you all. I yield back to
Thank you, Senator Hickenlooper. Senator Hoven.
Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. Ms. Stone Manning, good to see you. Thanks for visiting earlier by phone. If confirmed, in regard to earlier question by Senator Langford, you, I think, answered well that public land should be available for multiple use, correct? You believe that to be the case?
Yes.
Yeah. And if confirmed, are you willing, in regard to energy development, will you commit to resuming quarterly lease sales for energy development on federal lands?
Senator, I understand that the department is currently reviewing the oil and gas program, and I'm not there, so I'm not privy to those conversations. If I have the honor of being confirmed, I look forward to being a part of those conversations and with this committee and folks on the ground to figure out the best path forward for energy development in the century we're sitting in.
Well, that goes to another question that Senator Langford asked, and that is if something gets continually delayed, that's the same as not allowing it. And I'm sure my colleague to my immediate right is going to share the same concern. I share that concern. Senator Langford shared that concern. What about continuous delay? Are we going to see that?
Senator, when I was the director of the Department of Environmental Quality in Montana, I had a goal of providing certainty for folks. Certainty for business, certainty for local communities, for the conservation community. And I was clear with people that I would take as transparent and open and timely approach as possible, and that no one would be surprised by the decisions that we made because everybody would be part of the decision-making along the way. I commit to you that we're going to work as efficiently as possible as government should.
What impact on the environment would result from closing off access to our federal reserves and shifting global production to places like Russia, Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela, which have less stringent environmental regulations?
Senator, the President has called us to work towards a clean and equitable future for our economy. And I think that future depends on being secure. And so that would be my approach, working with the Secretary, working with the President to ensure that we provide and lead the world in a 21st century energy economy.
Would you acknowledge that not having takeaway capacity for things like natural gas, meaning gathering system and pipelines, actually is less environmentally sound than making sure that we have that transmission capacity so that we can get that product to market as safely as possible?
Yes, Senator, I understand the importance of that question, particularly to your state, and I would look forward to working with you on that issue.
Ms. Baker, thank you. Ms. Baker, if confirmed, will you commit to working with DOE's Office of Indian Energy and interested tribes to ensure tribal nations are able to continue developing their oil and gas and other energy resources? One of the tribes in our state, actually Mandan Hidatsa Rekra Nation, if they were a state, they'd be like in the top 10 oil and gas producing states in the nation. They do it very well. So are you willing to help empower tribes for all kind of energy development with good environmental stewardship, of course?
So, Senator, thank you so much for that question. I've spent a decade working with indigenous communities all over the world, and what I've come to understand through that work is that no community is a monolith. And so each community has its own hopes and dreams and its own vision of what it wants. I've also learned that consultation is key, and really, leaning into relationships with leaders in that community in order to advance objectives. And so, if confirmed, I would be honored to work with Wahala Johns, who is the director of the Office of Indian Energy, to really understand the complex array of issues that our indigenous communities around this country face.
I appreciate that answer. Also, how about carbon capture? So again, as we're doing these things, both on traditional and renewable energy, we want to lead the way in carbon capture. Are you willing to help work with us and our tribes on that?
Senator, I would be honored to work with you and your office on this issue if I were confirmed. I also want to highlight here that, again, there's no one-size-fits-all solution, and I know that many communities are really interested in carbon capture, utilization, and storage, and I would be delighted to work with you to understand who those communities are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just final question for Mr. Walsh. You've confirmed, will you commit to ensuring that we have regulatory and certainty, predictability on matters before the department? You've got a lot of people out there trying to do a lot of things. If they get delayed forever, that sets them back. If they don't have regulatory certainty, they can't do the things, including investment, all the kind of things that create jobs and better environmental stewardship and everything else. So they need regulatory certainty. Will you commit to that?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Senator Hoven. Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Walsh, I know you've heard about the tri-party agreement and its role in ensuring the Department of Energy meets its legal and moral obligations to Hanford cleanup. As Secretary Granholm and Deputy Secretary Turk confirmed in their confirmation hearings, cleaning up Hanford, one of the largest radioactive waste cleanups in the world, is very top priority. And trust me, this isn't something that can be easily done. So the Hanford budget is paramount in living up to the tri-party agreement. Last year, the department's own website manager at Hanford said DOE would need to spend $3.3 billion in fiscal year 2021 to stay on track with the tri-party agreement. So that's DOE's own assessment. And yet the president's budget for fiscal year 2022 does not match that. So the answer is that the Department of Energy is not only proposing to reduce the Office of River Protection by 6%, the entire request is about $900 million less than what the department's own internal memo said was needed under the obligations of the tri-party agreement. So what will you do as counsel to ensure the department follows the law, and can you commit to meeting all the tri-party agreement milestones?
Well, thank you for the question, Senator Cantwell. First off, let me say that I fully understand the importance and the urgency of the department's efforts at Hanford, and that you can be certain that if confirmed, I will work closely with you and your staff and the officials in the state of Washington to do everything in my power to ensure that the department meets its obligations. And with respect to the budget request, I was not privy to the considerations that went into the president's budget, but again, I look forward to working with you closely on those matters going forward if confirmed.
So you will live up to the tri-party agreement and advise the Department of Energy to do so?
Certainly, my view is the department should seek to meet all its obligations under the tri-party agreement and the consent decrees.
Okay. The only problem with your answer is just a little hesitation. So I hope you feel very firm in the words that you just uttered, because that's what it's going to take. And so appreciate it. It is a legally binding document. Lots of secretaries of energy argue with the state of Washington and others over it. Listen, we have the tri-party agreement because the state has held the Department of Energy accountable. And so this is not a state of Washington problem. This is a national problem. And the state is just holding the nation accountable for cleaning it up. And so that's why we have the agreement. So every once in a while, somebody tries to do it on the cheap, and it doesn't work. So I appreciate you committing to that. Mr. Light, I wanted to ask you about your thoughts about the United States continuing to lead a role in diversifying our energy sources and how we do that at the international level. By the way, very much support the U.S.-Israel Energy Policy Office, which is doing, I think, some great work on energy security. And as we can see from our just recent pipeline event, we need all the security measures that we can take. But I think on battling climate, in 2020, the new capital investment in clean energy technologies totaled $500 billion. That's 2020. And in 2030, that number is supposed to be in the multi-trillion dollars as a market opportunity. So to me, I want to capture that market opportunity. I want to make sure that we aren't, we're talking about this big competitiveness bill on the R&D side, and we're glad that we actually got some R&D dollar increases in there for DOE. The chairman was instrumental in that discussion and very much appreciate his leadership on that. But what do we need to do to make sure that the United States can be a global leader in these international energy markets, which create millions of jobs?
Thank you for the question, Senator. So I will give credit where credit is due, and the Trump administration created the first ever Office of Market Development in the Office of International Affairs in the Department of Energy. Our office was created, or this office was created in the early 1980s, didn't have an Office of Market Development. I intend to triple the size of it, if confirmed, and make sure that we have got a team in the Department of Energy who's working every single day to help to expand our access to that burgeoning trillions of dollar market that's unfolding and getting bigger every single day. We need a whole of government approach on this as well. We've got competitors out there in the world, China, Russia, others who come in. They're able to not only, build you a plant, but provide the labor. In the case of nuclear power, they will take the waste out for you. We don't have that capacity right now. We need to make sure that we've got the Department of Energy working with the Department of State, working with Treasury, the Development Finance Corporation, the Export-Import Bank, USTDA, all of the array of things we have, but moving together, finding the strategic opportunities around the map and executing them.
And what would you say those three biggest opportunities are in?
In terms of regions of the world, ma'am?
No, just energy and the market, how big the market opportunity is. What would you say are big opportunities for the U.S. to focus on?
We have a tremendous opportunity still in conventional renewables. So we've got countries, again, like India with enormous targets. Prime Minister Modi has a target of 450 gigawatts of installed renewable capacity by 2030. We have a new partnership to do that. Number two, industrial decarbonization. So how do we sort of provide CCS and hydrogen solutions for things like steel, cement, chemicals? That's enormous opportunity. Number three, in nuclear. The United States can compete with Russia, with China, with Korea, with other providers, France as well. We are right now in the Department of Energy working on deals in Poland. We're looking at a deal in Romania. We've got deals that are unfolding in Slovenia. There are all these countries around the world that want to play serious in nuclear, and we've got the providers that can do that. And we're looking at billions of dollars in direct return to the United States in terms of benefit, just with one of those plants built in one of those countries.
Thank you. I'm sorry I was over my time, Mr. Chairman, but I really do believe in this important point that the United States has a huge job opportunity, not just here at home, but internationally. But we got to get it right. And the fact that you mentioned CCS, nuclear, and renewables all together, we all should be able to get around the table on this agenda, just like we are on the EFA bill. We all ought to be able to get around the table and say, this is the market opportunity that creates U.S. jobs. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Now we have Senator Murkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just following on Senator Cantwell's comments there, Dr. Light, I might commend to you legislation that we have just recently introduced called the SEMI-Act, the Strategic Energy and Minerals Initiative, but dovetails very, very neatly with what you have just outlined there. And would ask that you take a look at that.
Yes,
I want to direct my comments to you, Ms. Stone Manning. And I will first start off by just acknowledging, I think you just mentioned, Dr. Light, that you give credit where credit is due, and I appreciate the recent actions of the administration when it came to defending the Willow Project, located entirely within the National Petroleum Reserve, Alaska. That's going to be very, very, very important to our state moving forward. Another area that is going to be very important for our state moving forward is as it relates to the public land orders. These are land entitlements from basically from statehood. The department has recently taken unilateral action to pause these pending PLOs. This not only impacts the commitment made at statehood, but also to our Native Alaska Vietnam vets. Despite the promises of Secretary Haaland that she would engage in consultation on departmental actions that impact Native Americans and Alaska Natives, this decision was made without consultation. Again, I can't emphasize enough the significance of these PLOs. And if you are confirmed as director to the BLM, it's going to fall on you to rectify this wrong. I know that you have not been in place when this action was taken, but I certainly hope that you have been briefed on them. I would like you to explain to me your understanding of the recent PLO withdrawal revocation in the state.
Thank you, Senator, for the question, and I appreciated our time a couple weeks ago and look forward to more if I have the honor of being confirmed. I need to start with a little bit about my background. I am the daughter, the sister,
I don't mean to be rude and not go into your background, but I have very, very, very limited time. Can you just share with me whether you think it's appropriate for the federal government to continue to withhold land to the state of Alaska that it is entitled to under the Statehood Act?
Senator, thank you, and stepmom of veterans. And so you do have my commitment to both follow the law and follow and honor our commitment to our veterans in this country.
Well, it's not just the veterans. And again, we're keying in on the veterans because that was really, to me, that was just a slap in the face to our Native veterans and their allotment. But that's a very small piece of the broader issue of these PLOs and the fact that effectively it has been determined that it is, after decades now, it is time to release these. And it was only under this unilateral action from the Secretary that now everything has been put, quote, on pause. So again, I'm very concerned about not only the pause, but given your background with the National Wildlife Federation, where you were serving as Vice President for Public Lands, you're working for an organization that for years has worked to prevent the sale and transfer of national public lands to state and private owners. So I look at that, and then I look at this situation that you will have oversight of, and that causes me deep concern.
Senator, that's fair. And if I had the honor to be confirmed, I understand that being the director of BLM is a very different job than the work I have done at the National Wildlife Federation. And you have my commitment that I understand that the job is to follow the law and that the federal government has commitments to the state of Alaska. I understand that.
When I appreciate what you've just said there with regards to following the law, because current law mandates that 2 lease sales be held in the 1002 area of the Alaska National Wildlife Refuge. If confirmed as BLM director, you will be the one responsible for holding the second lease sale by 2024, which is currently mandated by law. So I would ask for your commitment, your reaffirmation that you will intend to follow the law as it relates to these ANWR leases.
Senator, I understand that the current leases are under litigation, and I expect, if I have the honor of getting there, that conversations will be informed by that for the second lease sale. And again, generally speaking, you absolutely have my commitment to follow the law. That's the job.
Well, it is the law, and again, I would just repeat, the Secretary of the Interior, by law, shall offer a second lease sale under the oil and gas program under this section not later than 7 years after the date of enactment of the act. That's the law. That's the law. And litigation is going on, but this is the law, and so we would expect and certainly intend that you would follow that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Daines.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I first want to begin by welcoming Tracy Stone Manning to the hearing today. Tracy has worked in and around Montana for many years. For the past few weeks, I've heard feedback from a lot of Montana stakeholders, some good, some not so good. And I look forward to the discussions today to clarify your position on these important Montana issues. The Montana conservation voters ranked cancellation of the Keystone XL pipeline as their top priority while you were on the board. The Keystone XL pipeline would have been a carbon-neutral, fair-wage labor project. Cancellation of the pipeline immediately cost us over 1,000 jobs and $60 million a year in tax revenue to the state of Montana, not to mention other indirect jobs and the economic devastation of these small rural Montana counties. Has your opposition to the Keystone XL pipeline changed?
Senator, thanks for the question, and it's an honor to be here with a fellow Montanan. The president has made his decision on the Keystone pipeline, and I am not and should not second guess him on that.
So you're still opposed to it, though? You were opposed to it before, you're opposed to it now?
Senator, again, I'm not going to second-guess the president.
I was asking about you, though. You opposed it before. Do you still oppose it now?
Senator, I served on a board of an organization as a volunteer, and like many organizations that do many things, sometimes board members agree, sometimes they don't.
What safer or cleaner method would you propose to move oil and gas versus a pipeline?
Yeah, Senator, I appreciate that question. I think that you know, depending on the mode of what's being moved, pipelines have been shown to be safer to human communities. Of course, there are problems with pipelines with
and lower carbon emissions as well,
and leaking and such. And you know, anytime humans do development and move products around the planet, there's impacts. We just need to be smart about mitigating those impacts.
I want to talk for a moment here about sage grouse. We've seen unprecedented investments in proactive collaborative sage grouse conservation across the West. The Trump administration worked to ensure federal land management plans were complementary to state plans. These efforts have the support of every Western governor, but you stated that you hope the court would strike down these plans. I would remind you that sage grouse is not listed on the Endangered Species Act, and therefore states should and have taken the lead in consideration. Is it still your position that the most recent sage grouse plan amendments should be rescinded either by the courts or the administration?
Senator, thanks for the question. In 2015, we had a remarkable thing happen. Westerners of all stripes came together and found agreement on these sage grouse plans. Governor Bullock and Governor Meade and Governor Sandoval and Governor Hickenlooper all standing on a stage celebrating the fact that we had found agreement. That then the Montana State Legislature backed with a $10 million investment to do our part. My concern was that the Trump administration had not given those plans time to work and that had not honored that original deal.
So it's still your position that they should be rescinded either by the courts or the administration?
I think that the 2015 plans needed to be given time to work.
Hey, Ms. Stone Manning, in 2015, you authored an article that called the Rock Creek Mine philosophically abhorrent, to quote yourself. Rock Creek Mine would create 300 full-time jobs and bring in $175 million in tax revenues. This project has been extensively researched, has a decades-long permitting history, as you know, and a strong local support. While this mine is permitted through the Forest Service and Montana DEQ, I've heard concerns from the community that such a strong opposition as yours against a Montana-led project might be indicative of a larger bias against mining on public lands. My question is it still your position that Rock Creek Mine and similar mining projects are, quote, philosophically abhorrent?
Yeah, Senator, thanks for the question, and I hope that you would look to my track record as Director of the Department of Environmental Quality in my ability to work closely with industrial applicants and be fair and be transparent and to make sure that any development is able to follow the law.
Do you still agree that it's philosophically abhorrent? It's you put it on the record there. Do you still agree with that statement, or would you rescind that statement?
Senator, I think many people were concerned about the idea of digging a mine under one of our first wilderness areas in the country.
So you still think it's philosophically abhorrent? Your words.
Senator.
Have you talked to folks up in Sanders County and Lincoln County about that?
Senator, I've spent long conversations with folks on the ground.
And would you tell them it's philosophically abhorrent?
And I spent many conversations. I remember talking about getting school books to school kids. We have a job to do as Montanans to create good-paying, family-wage jobs that come from development that is going to take care of our environment. And at the time that I said that, I was concerned about some of the hydrological studies and what it would do to the lakes in the wilderness.
And as you stated more, have you changed your opinion on that?
I haven't seen the recent studies. It's been years.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Daines. First, committees received letters from several organizations supporting one or more of the nominations. I ask unanimous consent to enter those letters into the record. At this point, and hearing no objection, it is ordered. Dr. Light, key points and key parts of Chinese solar panels are currently being manufactured in the province in China where the Muslim Uyghur minority is used in forced labor. Recent study from the United Kingdom Sheffield Hallam University found that forced labor permeates the entire supply chain of the solar panel industry. This has been broadly reported. Most solar modules rely on solar-grade polysilicon, and 45% of that is manufactured in the Uyghur region in China. Also been established that child labor is used in the production of cobalt in the Congo. Cobalt's a key material in electric batteries. Demand for it is expected to rise sharply. There's an article in The Economist 2 weeks ago about whether they can do electric vehicles recyclable and the batteries and all of these things. But if confirmed, we're trying to figure, what will you be able to do to ensure that the value chain of solar panels and batteries and wind turbines and other technologies are not tainted with forced labor and child labor?
Thank you, Senator Barrasso. This is a situation that concerns me gravely as it does you. It is absolutely appalling. The only good thing I can say is that it's good that we know what we're dealing with now. And so I think that the release today by the White House of this new report on supply chain is the first step of many steps that we have to do to respond to this. The Department of Energy led, in fact, the Office of International Affairs, the Department of Energy led on the part of the report that deals with batteries. And then you, of course, had Department of Defense dealing with critical minerals and so on and so forth. So now we know now we're getting more transparency about what the problem is. We're tracking not only the environmental impact of some of these supply chains, but obviously also the human rights violations there. The two things that we have to do, sir, is we have to, number one, we have to work with, at least from the perspective of the Office of International Affairs, we need to increase our domestic supply so that we're not relying on supply that is dirty one way or the other that you look at it. Number two, we've got to work with our allies to go on the offense, frankly, and that's the Congo case, where China has swooped in and taken about 30% and a slightly larger percentage of the owned cobalt reserves in the Congo than the Congo government owns themselves. And so we've got to go on the offense on this in the same way that we are going to have to do on all the other energy projects we've got to look at around the world.
So you agree with me that expanding domestic mining of critical minerals is going to make us less dependent on China and other foreign nations?
It will, sir, and something I look forward to working with your office on.
Mr. Walsh, you and a co-author published an extensive paper on electric transmission. I'd like to call upon your expertise on that subject. Just finished Bill Gates's book on what happens with the climate and what we need to do in long term, and he talks about the grid. To achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050 with wind and solar generation, what Princeton University has said in their Net Zero America report that projects that the United States would need to increase U.S. transmission capacity by more than 5 times to be able to do what they're talking about doing. And I would note that the Princeton scenario is actually less aggressive than what the Biden administration's goal is, that the power sector be carbon-free by 2035. So what facts do you know that suggest it's realistic to expect that so many electric transmission lines can be legally sited on anything like the timetable needed to meet the president's goal? And especially when we're even trying to bury lines, aren't able to dissipate the heat. So we're talking about overhead lines primarily because of the size of the lines and the desired or the necessary amount.
Well, thank you for the question, Senator. It's a very important one, and I do share the view that citing more high-voltage, long-distance transmission will be essential for maintaining a resilient grid and a supply of affordable, clean energy nationwide. And you are exactly right to put your finger on the issue of permitting and challenges. That is a real problem. The department has some ability to play a role in easing those challenges by coordinating with other federal agencies to streamline permitting processes. And if confirmed, I would look forward to engaging in those efforts and working with your office.
So do you think Congress should be passing laws to speed the regulatory process so that these needed transmission lines can be built?
Quite possibly, Senator. I mean, I would. I don't know that I could speak to the department on pending legislation, but it sounds like a laudable goal and something that I would look forward to working with your office on.
Ms. Stone Manning, the Bureau of Land Management manages livestock grazing, about 155 million acres of land in the western United States, Wyoming, Montana, lots of areas. Its issue is deeply important in my home state of Wyoming. I was at our Wyoming Stock Growers Association, their annual summer meeting that was this past weekend in Sheridan, Wyoming. If confirmed as director, you'd oversee this activity. Recently, I introduced a bill called the Ranch Act to promote resilient and healthy rangelands and effective grazing management across the West through the extension of grazing permits, adaptive management tools to better respond to extreme weather conditions and to fire. So please explain what your priorities would be for livestock grazing management and what changes, if any, you would make to improve how BLM administers permits and leases for livestock grazing as an important multiple-use activity on our public lands.
Senator, thank you for the question. A few years ago, I was visiting with a Cattlemen's Association that straddles the Idaho and Nevada state line and learned that some of them had permits that were 15 years out of date. And that's not government serving the people the way it needs to serve the people. So you would have my commitment, if I had the honor of being confirmed, of ensuring that we focused on that program and got people the tools they needed to do their jobs, to get updated permits into place, permits that brought into account people's understanding of the ground.
And thank you. Dr. Light, in recent testimony before the Senate Energy and Natural Resource Committee, I asked Faith Barrell, who is the head of the International Energy Agency, whether U.S. leadership in oil and gas production was a good thing for the security of international energy markets, and his response was yes, definitely yes. Do you agree with Dr.?
Completely agree.
Thank you. Senator Marshall.
So my first question is for Dr. Light. We had a great visit, appreciate that. You know, like you, I want to leave this world cleaner, healthier, and safer than I found it. I believe in using affordable, clean energy. I believe that we can take traditional energies and make them more affordable and cleaner by innovation and technology. As I think about this world challenge that we have with our environment, I think probably the biggest predictor of the carbon footprint of this world is our world economy, a strong world economy, which could lead to infrastructure. And that leads me to a nation, an ally of the United States that you're very familiar with, and the opportunities, I think, for India to have natural gas and other energy resources as well. But how would you see your role in promoting the opportunities for natural gas in India, and any other thoughts on developing countries and how they could best manage their energy, affordable energy and clean energy as well?
Well, thank you, Senator Marshall. I very much enjoyed our conversation yesterday. I appreciate it. So yes, sir, India is one of the countries that I know best. Probably the only country I know a little bit more about is the United States. And one of the great things that we did, as you know, sir, coming out of the President's Climate Action Summit, was created a new overarching energy and climate umbrella platform with India to try to help India to get to their goal of their 2030 goals of 450 gigawatts of installed renewable capacity. Now, I think that we have got if we can create the markets in India on abated natural gas, on abated coal, on nuclear, on hydrogen, right? They already have the targets there on renewables, then you can change the world. And the United States should be the biggest supplier for all of it. So I think that what we need to do is to work with the Modi government to make sure they can hit the targets that they have and empower them to hit even bigger targets, especially in the decarbonization of heavy industry.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And my next question for Tracy Stone Manning. Ms. Manning, it's come to my attention that you accepted a 12-year personal loan based on your financial disclosures. And if you've been asked this, forgive me, it's hard bouncing back and forth. But you took out a personal loan between $50,000 and $100,000 while you were working as the state director for Senator Tester. And according to your disclosure, it looks like you received that at an interest rate of 6%, but the going rate for a consumer loan was 11%. Do you feel like that's some type of a conflict of interest to take out a personal loan when you're working for a United States senator? And were you aware the difference in the interest rate was significantly below the average?
Senator, I appreciate the question. Ethics are deeply important to me. Like many families in 2008, we got smacked by the recession, and a friend loaned us some money to make sure that we could get through it. And we came to terms, and we honored the loan.
Do you feel like that you gained something by that, by not paying the standard interest rate, that you were giving an interest rate less than the average consumer interest rate was then?
Senator, I was grateful for the help from a friend.
All right. Dr. Light, let's go back to you. What other opportunities, we mentioned India, what other energy opportunities are there out there that would both help the United States economically, but also to make the world a cleaner place to be?
There's plenty. That's we have an abundance of opportunities out there, sir. As I said before, a $23 trillion opportunity, and that's the floor by 2030 if you unpack the different commitments that parties have made out there. So, for example, I think that there's an incredible array of opportunities in the transportation sector, the low-carbon and zero-carbon transportation sector throughout South America. If you unpack the commitments that different parties have made there under the Paris Agreement, we have an enormous possibility with high-tech in terms on the cooling side in the Gulf states. We have nuclear opportunities just all over the world at this point for those countries who decide to use nuclear energy. It's as a safe part of their decarbonization strategy. We should continue supporting our hydro assets as well in those countries that have safe, secure, and reliable hydro assets. There really is no end to it. I think the only thing we need to do is to get the United States interagency together and figure out what our highest target opportunities are with a very clear eye on where other countries are going with dirtier technology. That is what China is doing now. The only way we can stop them is to get our skin in the game and offer something better.
Could I have one more question, Mr. Chairman?
Please, go right ahead.
At the time. So I'm going to go back to Dr. Light one more time here. I believe if the entire world would start using E15, we would decrease tailpipe emissions by 40 or 50%. We have that technology today. It's not something that we're dreaming about.
Right.
What are the opportunities for biofuels as far as trying to lower the carbon footprint of the rest of the world?
There's an enormous array of opportunities from conventional biofuels to the more advanced ones. And one of the things that I was very pleased to see is that last week at the combined ministerial meetings of the Clean Energy Ministerial and Mission Innovation processes, the United States got in and has become a leader on the biofuel platform there in the Clean Energy Ministerial Forum. We also decided to co-lead with Denmark and others on an advanced shipping fuels initiative where biofuels will have a very big opportunity there as well. So across the transportation spectrum, again, there is nothing but opportunity if we get out there and we get in front of it.
Thank you. We look forward to working with you, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks so much, Senator Marshall. I want to thank all of you and congratulate all the nominees for today. We appreciate you being here with us this morning, your responsiveness to our questions and concerns, and your willingness to take on these important jobs. Members are going to have until 6 p.m. tomorrow to submit written questions for the record, and we ask that you get back to us very quickly with those responses. With that, the committee stands adjourned.